December 2025. A deadly parasite, long thought eradicated, has resurfaced just 197 miles from Texas, devouring newborn calves alive and triggering emergency meetings in the governor's office. The last time screwworm crossed this border, it cost billions and left ranchers digging maggots from wounds with their own hands. If it breaks through again, nothing will stop it from turning Texas's cattle industry into ground zero. How did we let this nightmare return? In the years before eradication, screwworm was an everyday terror on Texas ranches. Calving season meant sleepless nights, not because of the weather, but because a single open wound could become a death sentence. Ranchers kept pocket knives and forceps at the ready, digging writhing larvae from the flesh of newborn calves, lambs, and even pets. The toll was staggering. In the 1960s, screwworm cost the Southwest $100 million every year, draining ranch profits and pushing some operations to the brink. Texas white-tailed deer herds saw fawn losses as high as 80% in bad years, whole generations wiped out before they could stand on their own. Everything changed in 1966. After years of relentless effort, the United States declared screwworm eradicated within its borders. The sterile insect technique, flooding the environment with lab-reared sterile males, broke the parasite's life cycle and gave ranchers a chance to recover. The payoff was immediate. By the mid-1970s, annual economic benefits to United States producers reached $200 million, and the threat faded from daily life. But the lesson was clear. Delay in fighting screwworm meant multiplying losses. In 1976, when the parasite flared up again in Texas, the outbreak infected nearly 1.5 million cattle and over 330,000 sheep and goats. Producers spent $132 million that year alone, with total economic losses topping $330 million, numbers that would exceed $2 billion today. The danger is not just historical. In 2016, screwworm surfaced in the Florida Keys, killing more than 130 endangered key deer before emergency teams could stamp it out. The response worked, but only because action was immediate and massive. Every outbreak, from the open ranges of the 1960s to the wildlife preserves of Florida, has proven the same point. Screwworm can be beaten, but hesitation is costly, and the price of delay is measured in both dollars and lives. A single screwworm fly can change the fate of an entire herd in less than a week. The danger starts the moment a female lands on a fresh wound, no bigger than a tick bite, a navel stump, or a surgical cut. She deposits a cluster of eggs, often 100 to 300 at a time, right at the wound's edge. Within 24 hours, those eggs hatch into larvae that immediately burrow into living tissue, not dead flesh like ordinary maggots. Over the next 5 to 7 days, these larvae feed relentlessly, enlarging the wound and causing deep, painful destruction. Without intervention, the animal is overwhelmed, sometimes within days. Adult screwworms stand out in the field with metallic blue-green bodies, bright orange eyes, and a size nearly double that of a housefly. But it is the female's biology that gives responders their best weapon. Unlike most flies, a screwworm female mates only once in her life, usually 4 or 5 days after she emerges. Every egg she lays after that single mating carries the fate of her entire lineage. If she mates with a sterile male, none of her eggs will hatch. That is the scientific lever behind the sterile insect technique, flooding the environment with sterile males and ensuring that most wild females produce nothing at all. Frontline action depends on this timeline. Every fresh wound is a potential entry point, and the clock starts ticking the moment it appears. Daily inspection is non-negotiable, especially during calving, branding, or any procedure that breaks the skin. If a suspicious wound is found, one that is moist, painful, with maggots visible in living tissue, immediate isolation and reporting are essential. Delay allows larvae to mature, drop to the ground, and pupate, setting the stage for the next generation of flies. For Texas producers and veterinarians, the directive is clear. Act within hours, not days. The biology of screwworm leaves no room for hesitation. For decades, the barrier zone in Panama acted as North America's firewall against screwworm. That line held for years, with sterile flies released over the jungle to keep the parasite bottled up far to the south. But by 2024, that defense had faltered. Mexico began recording thousands of screwworm cases, not just in the south, but spreading steadily northward. Outbreaks moved through key cattle states, following commercial corridors that funnel livestock toward the United States border. The cattle trade in Mexico runs like an artery from the tropical lowlands up through Veracruz, Tamaulipas, and Nuevo León. Feedlots in these northern states became the new front line. Infected animals, trucked hundreds of miles from outbreak zones, arrived at finishing yards near the border. Reports from Nuevo León described cases in cattle that had been moved out of Veracruz, a state already struggling to contain the parasite. One feedlot in Montemorelos saw repeat detections, each traced back to shipments from the south. In Sabinas Hidalgo, just 70 miles from Laredo, field reports placed screwworm-infested cattle within striking distance of Texas. By early 2026, the pattern had changed. New cases in Tamaulipas, one in a 6-day-old calf with no travel history, signaled that screwworm was no longer just hitchhiking on livestock. The parasite was now present in animals born and raised within 200 miles of the Texas border. With over 13,000 cases logged across Mexico and nearly 500 still active, the northward march was no longer hypothetical. The parasite had found a pathway, and the next crossing could be just a matter of time. Mexico's screwworm crisis is now measured in hard numbers. More than 13,000 animal cases have been confirmed nationwide, with just under 500 still active as of early 2026. The parasite's relentless climb north has already forced a reckoning in the USA cattle sector. Texas alone holds over 10 million head of cattle, the largest herd in the country. A single widespread outbreak could inflict losses on a scale not seen in decades. Based on historical data from the 1960s and the 1970s, federal analysts warned that a modern screwworm incursion could cost Texas upwards of $2 billion in a single year, factoring in direct livestock deaths, treatment costs, and the ripple effect through rural economies. The stakes extend beyond ranch gates. The Texas deer hunting industry, valued at nearly $10 billion annually, faces its own existential threat. Screwworm's history of wiping out up to 80% of fawns in bad years hangs over the state's wildlife and over the businesses that depend on them. Even the national beef supply feels the pressure. The United States typically imports between 1.2 and 1.5 million feeder cattle from Mexico each year. With the parasite now entrenched in border states, agriculture officials have tightened controls, deploying tick riders and border patrols to intercept high-risk animals. USDA projections estimate that beef production will drop by at least 170 million pounds in 2025, a direct consequence of the ongoing crisis. Every new detection, every active case in Mexico, represents a potential breach. The economic exposure is not a distant threat. It is a daily calculation for ranchers, hunters, and policymakers weighing the cost of inaction against the price of containment. Federal and Texas leaders face a race against time. The new USDA sterile screwworm fly production facility in Edinburgh, Texas, is designed to turn out up to 300 million sterile flies each week, enough to blanket the border with a living barrier. But the plant remains under construction, with full-scale output not expected until late 2026. Until then, the only steady supply comes from the long-running Panama program, which disperses 100 million sterile flies each week across Central America. That output was built for a much narrower front, not the vast risk zone now looming over northern Mexico and South Texas. On the ground, every available asset is pressed into service. Over 8,000 traps span Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico, checked regularly for any sign of screwworm incursion. Detection dogs, specially trained to sniff out infested wounds, patrol high-risk ranches. Tick riders on horseback crisscross the borderlands, searching for stray livestock that could carry larvae north. Yet even with these measures, there is no treatment approved for screwworm in United States livestock, and if the fly crosses, response depends on containment, not cure. With winter holding fly numbers at bay for now, the clock ticks towards spring 2026. Rising temperatures will trigger a surge in fly reproduction, just as the sterile fly factory remains months from full power. Governor Abbott and USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins have called for urgent funding and field support to bridge this gap. More surveillance, faster reporting, and all hands on deck. The message is clear. The window to act is closing, and the cost of delay could be catastrophic for Texas herds and the nation's food supply. As sterile fly production lags and spring warmth returns, every mile the screwworm advances threatens $2 billion in the food chain itself. This is not just a rancher's problem. Biosecurity lines everywhere are only as strong as their weakest link. The next outbreak could start anywhere. Stay alert.